Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to emulate the look of 8mm film in the best way I know how. So if you want footage from a camera like this to look more like it was shot on this, then keep watching. So before I waste any more time with any stupid other transitions that I do, I just want to quickly go over, this was all shot on S-Log3 with the FX3 at 10-bit color. So definitely use the flattest color profile as you can. And yeah, so let's hop right into Premiere and I'll show you how to get started. All right guys, so now we're in Premiere. I'm gonna quickly go over what makes, 8mm film look like 8mm film as opposed to like the regular footage from like a regular modern day camera. So I pulled a couple frames from this guy Russell Chai's video, very good. I'll leave a link in the description to it. He shot everything on authentic 8mm film. So I'm gonna point out a couple characteristics that we're gonna look to emulate. So we can kind of pull up here. We obviously have the 8mm film overlay. You can find plenty of these online. I'm not really gonna build my own because there's just a ton of resources online where you can kind of download this, and that will be the last step that we actually do. To kind of go over a couple things, you can clearly see that this is not the sharpest image, and we obviously have some characteristics of grain. So that will be kind of the first thing that we're going to attack, as well as kind of the color. So to first, let's try to make our frame look a little bit more blurry. So to do that, all we're really going to do is we're going to go into our effects panel, and I kind of like the look of Gaussian blur. So we're going to drag and drop that right onto our footage. Personally, I think that 5% looks just about good. I think that it kind of just takes a little bit of the sharpness out of the image, but that's really dependent too on the resolution that you're actually shooting. 5 looks good. Always repeat edge pixels, otherwise you might have some really strange things if you end up cropping, so just good to know. You can, as always, like experiment with different values too. I personally just think that 5 looks, it's not overboard and it's not that terrible either. Next, I want to kind of go over some color data in all these frames. So we can see here that in particular in this frame, we're seeing a lot of information that's stored kind of on the higher end for red, green, and then we have a little bit more latitude on the blue. That's really where the blue is more, it's more seen in the shadows. So like right here of the image. And then we can kind of look at the next frame here again, where we see not a ton of dynamic, quote unquote, dynamic range or contrast, and that's just the effect of like actually using film. It's a very low contrasty look, but again preserves a lot of the highlights, which I think is really like what we all want when it comes to color grading. We'll look at the next one too, same type of thing. Like we have everything between 80 and 0. I would say that this frame in particular is more close to like 80 to 51 or 80 to 20. So what we're gonna take this information, we can kind of look at our regular footage and we can see that it's already pretty compressed because like I said, it was shot in S-Log. So if I were to regularly grade this, I would probably just do the good old pull down saturation and find my black point that I really want black, and then here we go. That's close to around where I want. Bring up saturation, and that works, I think, the best for something like this. So that's like a regular grade, and then of course you add your saturation and stuff like that. But what I'm gonna actually do is I'm gonna add a little bit of fade, because that's pretty similar to what's going on right here in kind of the shadows as well. So we're gonna add a little bit of just fade to it, and we're gonna just eliminate all the value that's left of this point. So next I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast because I think that this frame just generally needs it. So that's just a simple S curve. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, I think that we're really just pulling out some of that detail in the shadows, which I think is pretty on par with that image. Of course, we're not looking to really emulate the exact look because it's a completely different frame than what this frame is. So keep that in mind too. So here we are back in this. I'm gonna just mess around a little bit with the highlights. I think that a lot of the time when we're looking at film, it's either super duper shadowy or super duper it retains all the information, the highlights. So we're gonna try to see if we can kind of pull that out a little bit more and just pull values from the highlights and give a little bit more information to that. I think that's pretty close to what we want to do. And now let's kind of go with saturation. I think that if we're looking to emulate this frame, we're going to obviously see that there's a lot of information in the blues. I don't necessarily think that would be appropriate for this. but let's give it a shot and see how it looks. So if I honestly think that we should subtract some blue value and make it a little bit orange, or yellow rather. So the way I kind of do that is I go into my blue color curve and I'm going to add a point on closer to the highlights, and I can just subtract from there, and that will give it kind of more of this orange tint or yellow tint. Then bring up my shadows just a little bit just to even the image out. Yeah, I think just like that looks good. And I think we're honestly okay with that. Let's jump into saturation a little bit here too, just because I think that the greens in this really deserve a little bit more. So we're gonna add 2 points, one to the yellow and one to kind of this like almost cyan color. And we're just gonna pull it up a little bit, like so. And I think that because the car is blue, let's add just a little bit to it, not too much. I think that this image is pretty much good to go. I would say that this, in my opinion, is graded. We have a lot of information that's stored really in the shadows and the midpoints, but almost nothing you'll see in the blacks. So we'll kind of go. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I think that this is good. All right, so now I'm gonna add the overlay. I believe I got these from Ezra Cohen, a super talented editor. I highly recommend you check out his stuff. It's well worth the fucking money. I'll leave in the description his channel and his page so you can purchase these, but there's tons of free alternatives if you don't want to spend the money, and that's perfectly understandable too. So now that we brought this in, we're gonna change the blend mode to multiply, and we can see that it just subtracts all the white from it. So we already are kind of emulating this a little bit. It's obviously not perfect to what the typical one looks like. We don't have this preparation, but we can actually add that in. It was included in my pack. I'll add it in now. All right, so I added in the preparation, and I'm not gonna change that. I'm gonna change the position of this just a little tiny bit, just like that. And there you go. Like, you could be very happy with this image and consider it a quote unquote emulation. But in my opinion, I think that this just isn't all the way there. So myself, I've actually shot with 8mm cameras in the past, and the 8mm camera that I own only shoots in 18 frames per second. And I think that if we can add that one more layer, it kind of sells the effect just a little bit more. So in order to change your frame rate, as opposed to doing it in camera, is we can use an effect called posterized time. So we can just drag and drop that onto here, and from there we can go into our effects panel and change this down to 18, and we'll kind of just play this back. Hopefully Premiere doesn't have an aneurysm. Alright, so Premiere is having an aneurysm, so I'm going to render into out for this. And posterized time is really like one of the heavier effects, so definitely do this at the end of your emulation and then render into out just to make sure. But definitely save this for the last step. So here we go. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. It just kind of sells the 8mm effect just a little bit more. Honestly, I feel like that's pretty good. We're like 90% there, but I think that we can kind of take things to the next level if we want to add a level of halation to it. Okay, so the first way I'm going to do this doesn't require any plugins or anything like that. You'll notice that I moved up these two video layers. These are just modifiers, so we don't really need that. We only need this one clip, and what I'm going to do is hold my Alt on my keyboard and then just drag it up. That just duplicates the clip. Easy as that. Because we stored the color information and all the other effects on this video clip, all those will be transferred as well. So we want to start by getting rid of all of those, posterized time as well. And then you will go into your effects panel and search up channel blur. We're going to take this and we're going to just throw it onto that. We're not going to do anything with it yet, because what we need to do first is actually just modify the image so that it's only targeting the highlights, and then we can add a blur to it. So the way that we're going to do this is actually going to be muting all the other colors besides red, because that's the desired output of the halation, the desired color. So we're going to bring green all the way down, we're going to bring blue all the way down, and now we just have red. So you can see everything in this image is completely the same as our regular S-Log image. It retains the same information. So our next step is to kind of mute everything except for the highlights. So I'm going to bring this point down and kind of play with it a little bit to see exactly where we can go. Maybe I'll add another point just to bring up a little bit more. Maybe one more to really just target just the highlights. Like really all we're looking for are these headlights in here, and then a little bit on the sides. This is obviously going to be super scene dependent, but really just look for anything that's going to be a highlight. So once you've done that, we're really at a good spot. What we want to do is just change the blurriness of the using channel blur. So we're going to just bring it up just a little bit. And again, this is very intensive on your computer, so definitely just be patient with Premiere on this. All right, so 10, yeah, so really all we're getting is those headlights. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down to the blend mode, then we're gonna change it to lighten because we wanna add on, and it looks like our image is already looking a little bit better. So once you add this blur and you change your blend mode to lighten, you can start using just general exposure to kind of modify the amount of the output that you want. So I'll take exposure and I'll just raise it all the way up, just for an example, and you'll see that everything is really there, because what we're doing is we're taking all the information that's stored here and we're pushing it over to the right. But obviously that's not really what we want, so I'm going to tone it down just a little bit, a good amount actually, and I would say I'm pretty happy with that. So you can see if I just change this, you can see that we're starting to see a little bit more of this red blur on the actual image itself. So I hope that kind of helped for adding halation to it. It's always nice to just have this option. It kind of adds just another layer to it of complexity to this effect, but this is totally, you don't need to do it for every effect or every clip, just because not every single film has halation in it. But that's how I do it. That's the easiest way you can really do it without buying any plugins. Alright guys, so if you watch this back, I actually made a mistake. I said to delete posterized time. That's actually incorrect. What we want to do is add posterized time to that second video layer again, because you can see here the halation is actually coming off of the car because the frames aren't perfectly synced. So that's obviously can be corrected just by searching posterized time and just throwing it on the top layer. And we change this back down to 18 frames per second, and we can see that once Premiere kind of fixes itself, it is just fixed. So that's an easy fix for that. Sorry about that. Alright guys, I hope that this video helped. If it did, consider leaving a like or a comment. I would really appreciate any comments, whether it's questions, concerns, or just general comments about the video itself. Really want to just like move this channel in more of a direction of tutorials, not only just color grading, but also actually like cinematic breakdowns. So if that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing, considering checking out some of my other videos. If you have any comments, again, feel free to leave it in the description, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. All right, thanks.